So you are unique. That's great. But what does this mean for leaders? Did you know that Gallup research about what makes the best leaders so great showed that they had nothing in common except for one thing? It was not their education, their experience, their personality, or any other trait you would have expected. It was the fact that they could recognize the uniqueness of each individual with whom they worked. In this episode of the Morpheus Intelligence Update, we see what neuroscience says about you and your uniqueness, and what this means for you as a leader and your teams.
We're going to start with this idea of the neuroscience of uniqueness. And it's a really interesting concept because we kind of all have an intuitive feel that we're all different, and we know a little bit about it from it physically. Our fingerprints and our retinas are different, and quite a few different things. But what we may not all be completely aware of is how this works with the brain, and whether that is cast in stone or not, which is a really interesting concept. And so as we're going to explore this a little bit, I'm going to be taking you through some concepts. And I'm going to start with talking a little bit about the brain. And it's now been tested. We used to believe, by the way, it was about 100 billion, sorry. So we thought we had 100 billion neurons in our brains. Science is now advanced, and we now know it's 85 billion. Well, maybe a few more for Bruce Wade, maybe a few less for me, I don't know. But something around there, about 85 billion neurons that we each have in our brains. Each of those neurons supports 15,000 connections to other neurons. And so you have these paths between all these neurons. So you've got 85 billion neurons, about 15,000 paths per neuron. Now, this is really interesting because if you take the maths of that, then statistically, the chances of you finding somebody else with the same brain wiring as you is around about 85 billion to the power of 15,000. So 85 billion times 85 billion times 85 billion, 15,000 times. Now, I know the skeptics amongst you are kind of going, but hang on, there are not that many possibilities because that would not result in a functional human being. And of course, we could even debate whether I'm a functional human being or not, or that kind of thing. But even if you just take, the number is so big that even if the vast majority of those combinations couldn't actually work as human beings, the reality is there is nobody who thinks exactly the way you think, whose brain is exactly the way that your brain is. And so from a brain uniqueness point of view, statistically, nobody has ever lived whose brain is like yours. Nobody ever will. You are unique in that sense. So what does that mean? What are the implications? Well, we're going to get into that a little bit more detail later on. And so therefore, it is also about our sort of distinct wiring, our unique personalities. And it's really interesting because personalities are not quite as cast in stone. I mean, not that our brain wiring is cast in stone, but our personalities are a form of expression of that brain uniqueness and other uniquenesses in us. And so the whole brain thing is not completely fixed, but it is unique, which is like, I sometimes kind of go, how does that work? But we do see a uniqueness that comes out. There are certain things that I can do where I am absolutely brilliant. There are other things that no matter how hard I try, how much knowledge I add, how much skill I add, I'll never be more than mediocre. So what is that about? What's that sort of uniqueness and those distinctions in personality about? Now we can take this a step further and now talk about growth. Our uniqueness is not limited to how we are now. The reality is that for pretty much all of us, if we had to look in 5 years' time, we would find some things that are distinct and new and fresh versus who we were 5 years previously. And so I'm not planning to be exactly who I am now in 5 years' time. Now, that's quite an interesting concept because in many ways, I keep talking about how I want to be more of who I am now. And we'll come back to that point a little bit later on. But it's this quite an interesting sort of balance between, do we believe that we are unique and statically unique and we're just always going to be exactly the same? Or do we believe that we have endless possibilities in the way that we can develop? And so it's not static, but it's also saying that whilst there are incredible possibilities of developing, there may be some wisdom required about where we can develop and how we can develop. And so this is what of all of this is. You are unique. You're going to continue to be unique even from who you are right now. Now, I hope that makes sense. So let's move on to the next issue and the next point, which is, why does this even matter? Why are we concerned about this? So what we're going to do is, before we even jump into this, we are going to be talking a little bit about this unique wiring, but we're going to do a poll. So I want to do a quick poll. So please put your answers into the chat. And the first poll that we're going to be doing is, do you believe that you are wired uniquely? In other words, it's preset, it's there, it's done. Or do you believe you can be anything you want? And you can put in either number 1 or number 2 into the chat. Are we wired uniquely? Now, I've given a lot of hints already what the answers are to this, but are we wired uniquely, and can we be anything that we want to be? That's really interesting. So I've got answers of both. I've got answers of yes, both. Okay, and so this is getting really, really interesting, because a lot of the debate I've been listening to is the sort of wiring debate versus what they call the neuroplasticity debate. And this is where it gets very, very interesting. Okay. And what is it? Can we be anything that we want? And it actually depends on how you interpret the question. And so Bruce's answer of yes, no could be a very interesting one. So we're going to actually debate that a little bit as we move forward. Thank you for your responses. So in terms of moving forward, we can talk about this wiring concept. And I believe, yes, we are wired uniquely. We each have a particular bent. We each have a particular way of being and natural talents that we can then leverage, and things that are available to us, and things that we are just not good at. I mean, I have some quite debilitating weaknesses that it seems that no matter how much effort I put into them, they're not changing. So this is really interesting. So the flip side of this is this idea of we can be anything that we want. We can be absolutely anything we want. And here's where it gets really interesting. And this is where I think most of the debate of this neuroplasticity versus fixed wiring actually falls short, because the very issue is that who I really want to be is going to depend on my wiring. Okay, so I can become anything I want to. I just don't want to become anything, says Wilmin. And absolutely right. So, it kind of is quite dismissive to think, oh, well, neuroplasticity, just you can be anything you want. Your brain can get rewired, and it's possible to rewire your brain and all this kind of thing. What the research is now showing is that it seems there are certain things that we can modify more than other things. There are some things that are pretty static, and some things that are a little bit more plastic, a little bit more, and this is where the neuroplasticity comes in. And in particular, what we're finding is the greatest area of change and development is when we invest in our specific talents, our specific uniqueness. And so there is phenomenal growth and neuroplasticity in gaining knowledge and skill, and being practiced and being intuitive in an area of strength that can never be there in an area of weakness. And so very often when we ask somebody the question, you can be anything you want, and I say to them, oh, okay, great. So would you like to be an engineer? And they go, no. And you go to some other person, you say, would you like to be an engineer? And say, yes, that would be my ultimate. You go to somebody and you say, would you like to be an actuary? And for me, the thought of being an actuary, I couldn't think of something more horrendous just about in my life. And so I have a natural bent that says that's not what I want. Where does that bent come from other than our wiring? Okay, yes, maybe some experience stuff and so on. And so the very act of saying what I want to be is probably dependent on our wiring. And so these things are not mutually exclusive. You can be anything that you want, but you're only going to want, really want, truly want, in your deepest part want, in your essence want, something that is aligned with your talents, aligned with who you really are, aligned with your gift to the world. And this is where it gets so interesting. And so it's not actually an either or question. It's a bit of a both and question, but it means that anything that you want is probably also unique. And who you really, really want to be and what you really, really want to be is unique. And so that in itself is a bit of a mind blow. Yeah, sure. You're going to get people who are going to say, oh, well, I just want to make money. And therefore, I'm going to take whatever job pays the highest. And we see a lot of this. We see people coming out of university. They've studied something that either their parents pushed them to or they thought would make them lots of money. And then they get to look at what the day-to-day tasks are. And they go, this is going to kill me. I had a guy approach me, very, very excited. He got into banking. He really wanted to be in the banking industry. And he finished his studies. He did his internship. And he called me one day and he said, this is a disaster. Because if he has to do this for the rest of his life, he will die. And what can I do to help him? And we worked it through and realized that it was completely the wrong career for him. It looked like a career for stability purposes. It looked like a career for a good income, but it actually didn't suit who he really, really was. And so this is where it gets so particularly interesting, this whole idea of can we be absolutely anything that we want? And so we're dealing with this question of why does it matter? Bruce's lovely comment in the chat there, processing your potential depends on your potential to process. Couldn't agree more. And I think there's just, and it's even how to process and what to process. There's so many facets to that. Thank you, Bruce. All right, so let's, I want to talk about one last thing about why does this matter? This matters because what you believe about your uniqueness is going to impact the way that you live your life. So I'll give you a simple example to start with, and then I've got two specific things I want to talk about. But the first one is this. If each one of us is unique, and we are scientifically proven, neuroscientists completely agree with that, then we each have something to offer the world that nobody else could offer. And now this gets quite interesting. This matters because it's going to impact the purpose that you have in life and what you deliver in life. It's also going to impact if you believe that you can just be anything you want and absolutely anything you want, and it doesn't matter what your personal bent is or what sort of activities you prefer. You're just going to choose something that's going to make the most money. That's going to create some very limiting beliefs, maybe even some disempowering mindsets. Whereas if you can harness this and say, I am brought to this planet, I've arrived on this planet with a unique wiring that aligns with something meaningful that I can do, that's going to be an empowering belief. And that's going to set us up for a really fulfilled life, a purposeful life, a significant life. And so And then we can work on the disempowering mindsets, because very often we grow up with all sorts of mindsets, and we can then process those and get to a place where we have mindsets that empower us to find that purpose and live that purpose and to make our impact on the world. And so this is really the why that is so critical, is getting to know what we believe about this actually could impact how we can use this, how we can leverage it. And so who's this about? Who's this really about? Well, first and foremost, it's about you. It's about us as individuals. And I think it's really important. It is about primarily yourself. And the reason I say this is that any impact that you have on your community, on your world, on your environment is secondary to knowing yourself and investing in yourself and investing in your uniqueness. And so this is about self-empowerment. This is about opportunities for growing. Just because you have a talent doesn't mean it's yet a strength. It might need extra knowledge. It might need extra skill. It might need getting rid of some mindsets that are blocking you and building mindsets that empower you. It might be that you have some limiting beliefs that you need to liberate. And so it's really about self-empowerment. The second thing is it's about your opportunities for growth. And this opportunities for growth piece, I just love the research on this. There's research that shows in an area of a talent, your ability to grow within that is almost unlimited. If you think about a typical, let's go to the schooling system. You've got a particular student who gets 96% for maths. Does that mean that they fall short of a limit by 4%? No chance. They knew way more than that 96 that was actually asked. And in fact, if you had to give a much more open-ended test, they could maybe score 500% or 1,000% in relation to what we just saw. Whereas if you look at somebody who's really struggled, their brains are just not wired that way, they're always going to hit a ceiling. And you really don't want to be investing in trying to fix something that is actually kind of a wiring limitation. And yes, you can grow it a little bit, you can do little bits and pieces, but you're probably never going to be a maths genius if that is not your area. But much more of a tragedy is that you may actually be putting yourself away from your real gift and your real talent. And if you want to watch a great video on this, Sir Ken Robinson's, the late Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk on Do Schools Kill Creativity is a brilliant example of how we try and push everybody to try and be the same. So I'm back to what do you believe, versus allowing them to flourish in their particular areas where there's almost got unlimited potential in terms of growing. And so understanding your uniqueness is about where you will grow the most, where growth investments will produce the biggest return. And therefore, it's also about energy management. Marcus Buckingham says a strength is an activity that makes you feel strong, that makes you energized, that makes you alive, that actually puts you into flow. And therefore, it's about flow. You're never going to achieve flow in an area of non-talent. You're never going to achieve flow in an area where the synaptic connections between those neurons are like a jungle that you've got to hack your way through, whereas you've got other parts of your brain where it's already like a superhighway and you can just add and grow and grow and grow. And so the flow comes from that, where you're tapping into your uniqueness, and that's where it comes from, sort of an integration of you physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Everything is coming together at that point. And that really is what we call flow. But there is a secondary impact, the second who in terms of uniqueness. And that is your community, your people, your impact that you want to have, your purpose that you want to have in life, the broader context. And so this investment in self that I've been speaking about impacts everybody else. And your people around you probably understand your uniqueness better than you do already. They know, where you're strong, where you maybe have issues. And so you're going to find a lot of this kind of thing coming through in terms of your people, your impact, your understanding of them and accepting and embracing their uniqueness. But most importantly of all, it's going to impact your life goals and your life impact. because basically every one of your relationships is unique. And by the way, we're going to take that subject further next month, where we're going to talk about relational systems. And we're going to talk a lot about how relational systems work. And if you think about every relationship you have in your life is unique. There are no two identical relationships, which points to every person is unique and each relational system is unique. So we're going to talk a lot more about that. And of course, your purpose is unique as well. So just in the poll, just another poll to give a bit of a chat going here is poll number 2. What impact does your uniqueness have on your relationships, team, community, and goals? And while you're busy typing that, I'm going to start having a look at the next area. Okay, so let's have a look at the when of uniqueness. So we've dealt with the what, the why, and the who. We're next going to look at the when. So if you want to think about question in the meantime, that's in the poll. And as those come through, I'll have a look at them as well. So in terms of the when should we pay attention to this? Well, it's really interesting. I've mentioned this idea of growth. And a lot of people view growth as growth is when I become somebody else. One day when I'm more like Steve Jobs, or one day when I'm more, like Elon Musk or Nelson Mandela or Gandhi or whoever it might be. But growth is not becoming somebody else. Okay. And so this is where it gets really interesting. Growth is actually becoming more of who you really are. And I love this image of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly is the caterpillar becoming who it really is, becoming what is inside of it. And so growth is investing and nurturing, just like happens in the pupa, that nurturing of that transition to the fullness of what we can be, our full potential. And so it's really about investing in your talents, maximizing your talents, leveraging your talents. Therefore, this is quite urgent. Okay, this is actually becoming quite an urgent thing, because growth is investing in who we really are. The caterpillar takes the time. It probably doesn't have much of a choice about it because it's wired in, but it takes the time to spin, to have that inner transformation that results in that outer glory and that outer impact. And so this is really why I believe it's urgent. So I'm just having a look at the questions here. Eugenie says, my uniqueness enables me to work with many different communities, two realities that are worlds apart. And I know what you're talking about, Eugenie, and it's beautiful. Eugenie has this incredible ability to work cross-culturally. Tammy is saying, when I use it, it empowers, it edifies, it causes a ripple effect for positive change. Exactly. Roy talks about it helping connection and engagement at all levels. Michelle is saying, my uniqueness helps me understand the sides to a situation so that I'm able to get the best out of every situation. Oh, I like that one. That is your uniqueness. Thank you, Michelle. Excellent ideas coming through here. Thank you, everybody. So this then leads me to the how. Let's talk about the how. And I've only got about 5 minutes. So I'm going to go through this quite quickly. And I'm going to start with this. The number one thing to do in terms of this is discover and accept who you are. Discover, accept, embrace who you are. That is the number one thing in terms of growing and how you can leverage this uniqueness in your world. The second one is to grow and liberate who you are. So make investments in who you really are so that you can grow it, so that you can liberate who you really are. Now, here's the crazy thing is that I was given this slide to be using by my designer. And actually, we're busy developing an online version of a little course. And this course is called The Disruptive. Some of you here have actually done The Disruptive. But we have an online version, and we call it the Kickstart of Your Essence Journey, the Kickstart of Your Uniqueness Journey. And in this, we have 3 steps, 3 quite simple steps. The first one is connecting with your uniqueness. There's a whole process around that. Step 2 is freedom from fitting in. And finally, step 3 is to impact through radical self-acceptance, which is a really interesting concept. mentioned, we were talking about how we can leverage our uniqueness. And we first and foremost said that we discover and accept who we are. Secondly, we said we grow and liberate who we are. And the final step in this growth process is celebrate and love who you are. And this I found quite challenging. It was very interesting for me to make all these investments, discover a bit about who I am, and then can I celebrate and love who I am? That was a much more tricky thing for me to do. And so celebrating and loving who I really am has been quite a journey for me, but it's been an incredible boost to me. The more that I do that, the more I'm having an impact on the people around me, the more I'm fulfilled, the more I'm in flow, and so on. And so I'm going to conclude this presentation with a quotation. The quotation is this. It's from somebody called Glennon Doyle. I bumped into this a week or so ago, and it really had a deep impact on me, and I'm hoping it will on you too. So I'm going to read you this, and then we'll do some Q&A for any questions. The quotation from Glennon Doyle. I understand now that no one else in the world knows what I should do. The experts don't know. The ministers, the therapists, the magazines, the authors, my parents, my friends, they don't know. Not even the people who love me the most. Because no one has ever lived or will ever live this life I'm attempting to live, with my gifts and challenges and past and people. Every life is an unprecedented experiment. This life is mine alone. So I've stopped asking people for directions to places they have never been. I'm going to reread that last sentence. So I've stopped asking people for directions to places they have never been. Nobody else has ever lived your life or ever will live your life.